Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Reverend Jesse Jackson here. Welcome.
This is on the table in front of you.
Let me express my thanks to you today for inviting me here. Talking about the American Civil Rights Movement and the Roman Civil Rights Struggle for Recognition against racism, August 1st, 2019. I'll express thanks to around the road, please, sir. Around the road, please, sir. Give around the road if they can stand. Thank you for inviting me to Poland today and to speak to you today. In the short time I've been here, I've learned much about the Roma people and your struggle. Many common experiences that we have as African people of color in the U.S. For us, 400 years of slavery, 1619 to 2019. Roma people, 600 years struggling in Europe. Today in the U.S., we were told that Germany makes it a priority to combat and remove the blemishes and symbols of Nazism and fascism. In fact, sometimes Germany is held up as a model in making it illegal to display and demonstrate Nazism, swastika, and other remnants. On the ground, though, we see a different story about Germany today. Modern-day Nazis are wearing blue suits, dressed up in disguise. Every expression of Nazism must be fought at every level. Throughout Europe, hatred and racism is on the rise. Violence against the Roman people is on the rise. In Germany and in France and Europe, there's a direct line between Hitler's Nazis, today's modern-day Nazi and right-wing movement and parties. There's no hiding. They are Nazis in suits. The right wing in Europe is outmatching only by the U.S. White nationalism in America is on the rise. Behind the wall of ignorance, hatred, fear, and violence. The divisive politics of fear as opposed to the inclusive politics of hope. America, Charlottesville, the Nazis marched down the street, University of Virginia. Heather Heyer was killed as they used the tiki lamps to intimidate Jewish people. Mr. Trump's ban on Muslims. Several immigrant children from their parents at the borders. Shooting synagogues, mosques, and churches. The squad of four, go back where you came from, they cried out. Baltimore depicted as rat-infested. Obama birtherism. Let's not forget that Jesus was a border baby. Born as an immigrant on the occupation. Escaped Egypt as an immigrant. Gained asylum as a refugee. Let's not forget. Venomous attacks against blacks and Romans is on the rise. We must not stand still. On the one hand, it's dangerous, divisive, rather polarizing. The visible and invisible hand of racism at work. On the one hand, it's a diversion. We should be discussing climate change as the glaciers melt. Suburban reductions and attacks on democracy. Healthcare, easy access to guns, mass incarceration. Women, people, and African Americans share a legacy of racism and victimization and marginalization. We also share a legacy of fighting for our civil rights, of resistance to standing up for our rights and fighting back. We never lost a battle we fought, never won unless we fought, so it's fighting time. The bridges of hope and unity and tear down walls of fear and division. Globalization. Human beings, we have one basic origin and family. Human rights for all human beings and made human rights by one yardstick. We're all neighbors. In this world, there are no more fun. We left Chicago 8.5 hours away in Krakovie. In this world, there are no more foreigners. I leave New York going to Senegal, West Africa. You leave New York going to LA, we get there at the same time. In this world of vast technology, there are no more foreigners. We're each other's neighbor. It affects one of us directly, affects the rest of us indirectly. Jesus was asked the question one day, who is your neighbor? The first response was, who lives on my street? Ethnic, kin of my religion. So let me explain it to a parable. One day a man was walking down the street, attending to his business. Two thieves jumped behind the corner and robbed him. It frequently happened on that corner. It suggests there should have been infrastructure. It wouldn't have been a blind corner. They beat the man and left him to die. He lay struggling for breath and for life. He looked and saw his religious leader of his own religious persuasion coming. He felt relieved. But he went to the other side of the street and kept walking. His own religion. A man, the Levite of his own ethnic origin, went to the other side of the street. Samaritan, man from a different country, different culture, different color, who worship God differently, help them. Who is my neighbor? People care that you know. You really don't know that you care. We must choose enlightenment over fear and superstition, and hope over fear. As the young generation, let nothing break your spirit. No to Nazism, anti-Semitism, anti-Roma sentiments, anti-genic politics. We must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. I submit this to you today. We've learned some bad lessons real well. We must unlearn lessons of race glorification. We've learned some bad lessons too good. We must unlearn. We learned how to live apart. We must now learn to live together. Our future is living together in a one world order. I urge you today, let's go forward together with mass action, coalition action, an action of hope. It's a new day. It's your day. God bless you.
So we are lucky enough to actually be able to have a chance to engage in a conversation with Reverend Jesse Jackson. So we will welcome a few questions from the audience. Yes, please ask your questions in English.
I think that for the most part you've probably been asked this question many times, but I guess now that I have the chance to ask you this in person, I would like to ask you, what made you believe in a great man such as Martin Luther King? What...
apartheid in America. My father came from World War II fighting for Europeans to be free. Couldn't go to the home. He was part of that great battle at Normandy, Omaha Beach, that season of struggle. France got the right to go in 1945. We didn't get to 1965. It took me to fight back. The same people who fought for Germany have the right to vote, and France will not have by ourselves. So to fight back with survival. I came to school in 1959. I tried to go to the public library. I was arrested with 7 students trying to use the public library. And fight for dignity. I got on the bus, the public driver was here, the sign red color from the rear, white from the front. To fight back for dignity. In that lineage is Dr. King, fighting for dignity and for justice. Man, I looked at the soccer match on television last night. So I watched American football. Only the players still play Germans and Africans and Romans and Latin Americans. Why did we use the middle on the football field? Because whenever the playing field is even, and the rules are public, the goal to the referees is fair and the score is transparent, we can win. But even the playing field, there's no puzzle or no formula Romans cannot find an answer to. None of us have monopoly on wisdom. We must learn to live together as brothers and sisters and not die apart as fools. Thank you very much.
I would like to ask you a question. First of all, thank you for your support to the Roma movement, Roma civil movement. And nowadays, contemporary modern Europe, it's very similar to the situation in US in 50s and 60s. We did a lot from the Black movement in the States, how to fight the racism, the discrimination, the segregation. And my question to you is, how do you see the future of Roma in Europe? How we can fight the existing anti-Gypsyism in modern Europe? Because all those methods which were used until now, for the last 25, 30 years, we see that they don't give positive results. It's exactly the opposite. The anti-Gypsyism in Europe is increasing. Thank you.
There's a difference. The Roma are too invisible. You're not fighting back in the streets. We learned we had to fight back at risk with courage. When I came here yesterday, I don't know a single Roma sent down America. Too invisible. Melting into the white population. When you fight back, you win. You don't have to have a majority, just be morally right. There's power in being morally right. The cause of the Roma Center is morally right. If this room was pitch dark and there were no lights in this room, someone lit one candle that would challenge all the darkness. The Roma, you light that candle, the darkness will have to flee. Mandela and his law partner in jail 27 years. One light. South Africa had to come tumbling down. So I see the Roma people join the coalition. I put this when I was a kid, my grandmother could not buy for us a blanket, a piece of uncut cloth. We didn't freeze. She would take old shirts, dress the towels, cut them in pieces and clean them, put them on the bed. Apart, silk, cotton, rayon, red or blue. But connected together, they became a quilt, thing of beauty and warmth and culture. So I say to the Roman people, let's fight together. We're on the same kind of history. Your silence is betrayal. Don't be silent in the face of the pain you're going through. I'm glad to be with you today because I go back to America on this weekend. I want to see some Roma at the airport, identifying with the struggle here in Poland. Silence is betrayal. When you fight back, you win. Unless you fight back, you will not win.
First of all, thank you on behalf of all of us for coming all this way. It's a real honour to have you here. I've got two things I want to say to you. The civil rights struggle went on for so long, and it's still going on. And I wanted to know, firstly, if there is two pieces of advice that you would give our young people to keep challenging. And secondly, I wanted to ask you about what your opinion is about the media representation. Obviously, I'm from London, and obviously we have Boris coming in, and we have Trump over there, and I just would like, how do we keep pushing this and challenging? How do we keep the young people motivated and not to lose their enthusiasm like you did and you keep struggling?
Young people, your future at stake. Tomorrow is today. So don't stand still. Don't let cement dry. Like putty, you shape it. You must shape a new world. You will not inherit it. Effort and excellence means a lot. Inheritance and access means more. As you fight for freedom, you'll not gain it. Nor will you deserve it. You fight for it's yours. You cannot give it up. So I say the young Roma, Sentai, and Gypsies, let's join hands. Because these six spirits of Nazism and anti-Semitism, anti-Romism, are globally connected. You know, this is interesting how the world is made. Half of all human beings are Asian. Half of them are Chinese. One eighth of the human race is African, and 1/4 Nigerian. America is 6% of the human race, and so the rest are republics. 2/3, half of all human beings are Asian, 1/2 are Chinese. Most people in the world today are yellow, brown, black, non-Christian, poor, female, and don't speak English. We must find interest. I want to see some Roman people marching in Poland, in France, and Germany. You know, there's a Statue of Liberty in America at the harbor in New York. The French and British abolitionists were marching in France and Britain to end slavery. When we won the Battle of Gettysburg, the French abolitionists sent us as a gift a statue, now as a statue of workmen whites from Europe. It was a gift for French abolitionists for ending slavery. A smaller version of that statue is on the Seine River today in France. So I say to you today, when it's dark, turn on the light. Each of us has a light to get us a bright light that cannot be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Two over here.
That's it.
Yes, sir.
ask a question. I remember the scene where when President Obama was inaugurated, you were crying at some point. I read on TV, there was a scene there. So I'm assuming that the inaugural of the president, the African American, becoming the president, most powerful man. Civil rights movement. Now, afterwards, with the elections of Trump, I'm sure that it's a little bit different. Now, what is your interpretation, or what is your expectation of world leaders and people in politics in terms of how they should react to the problems of racism and the threats against all minorities around the world, be it the African American community or the Roma or the Sinti communities, their roles?
Tears rolled down my face because it was the memories of what had taken place to get us there, the moment in the movement. And so I cried with tears of rejoice. African Americans are not the bottom of American society. We're the foundation. The bottom is where you end up, the foundation where you start from. A few days ago, they celebrated July the 4th, Declaration of Independence. It started July the 4th, all white men. It was George Washington, Ben Franklin, this and that. Blacks have been in America 157 years before the Declaration. 157 years of work without wages, slave labor. We made cotton king. #1 product to India and to Britain and to France. At one point, there were more millionaires in Mississippi than New York. We made America wealthy. That made the world worth fighting for. And so it didn't start July 1st, it started 1619. We must define our own narrative. In 1861, 62, 89 years later after the Declaration of Independence, we still were in slavery. The South had become addicted to slavery, making money off of it, getting a sense of superiority. And so they tried to break off and form their own country, form their own currency, their own government, could deal with France and Britain. Niggas said you cannot break away. Matter of fact, it's really about slavery, but we talk about something else. Fact is, if I could send them back to Africa, I would, he said. If I could save the Union and end slavery, keep slavery, I would. But if I must even free them, I'll do it to save the Union. That was the hand of God. No one else could have conceived of that set of options. And when we were freed, the narrative is Lincoln freed us. We saved Lincoln. South has gotten as far north as Gettysburg, Antietam, Maryland. When blacks were freed, 200,000 joined the Union Army, stopped picking cotton, and began to build a new America. So America was saved by our work from 1619 to 1857, saved by our fight in 1865 and 1863. I submit this to you today, my friends. We must fight for a narrative that includes us. There's another celebration, Memorial Day. They talked about D-Day in Omaha Beach. D-Day freed France. We got the right to vote 20 years later. It was S-Day for us, Selma. When blacks got the right to vote in 1965, white women could not serve on juries in the South. 18-year-olds could not vote nor serve in Vietnam. When we won, the whole nation's arithmetic changed. Our fight for dignity is eternal. Trump is temporary. Our fight for dignity is eternal. We're not going to surrender, we're not going to fight back. No, we're going to fight fire with fire. I say you must, if the snakedom of, if, I, 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 I say you must, if the snakedom of If the snakedom of racism had to simply raise its ugly head, don't get down with the snake, you get at the snake's his province on the ground. Fly high like eagles. A lot of focus there in America on the border immigration. Fact is, 13 million Americans, 13 million people are undocumented, 13 million. America could not survive without the role of Indians and Asians in Silicon Valley. Most American undocumented workers are on college campuses. Why are they there? They're there because governments send their and pay their bills and have student loan debt. And so we cannot surrender to a narrative that accepts in any notion superiority. We're all God's children. We fight back together on that premise, we win. I say to you today that something glorious about the struggle that you're engaging in here. I'm glad to see Roma Center people come alive and go public with your struggle. Your struggle is our struggle. What affects one of us directly affects the rest of us indirectly. We need each other. When we fight back, we win. Thank you.
For being here, and I feel very honored to be in your audience. I'm Daniel Husseini from Albania, and I work for Roma Active Albania, but before I have done a fellowship in the things. I really liked when you said that Trump is temporary, but I'm very worried about something, about some politicians. Which is a genocide by racist people, and this is what I'm worried. So, as a human rights defender, these racist politicians, they don't be elected anymore. Thank you.
There is a tug of war for our souls, a tug of war. If you don't act, march, vote, participate, you give up the rope. You cannot give up the rope of hope and survive. We must hold that rope. That will not be the lost risk. We're not going back. We ain't going to lost risk no more. We ain't going back. We're not going back anymore. Now, there are some people who want us to go back. But we won against slavery. We won against Jim Crow. 5,000 blacks were lynched in 60 years without a single conviction. We won. We went from the bottom of the ship to the White House in 55 years. We're not going back. So don't tell yourself that there are some people who repeat, say, my enemy has a plan for me. I have a plan for me. My plan is forward by hope, not backwards by fear. No more switch. No more switch. We're not going back. We're not going back. Say I am. Like you mean on your feet. Say I am. Somebody. I am. Somebody. Respect me. Protect me. Never neglect me. I am somebody. My mind is a pearl. I can learn anything in the world if my mind can conceive it and my heart can believe it. I know I can achieve it. Stop the violence. Stop the violence. Save the children. Never surrender. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. No more invisible, Roma. No more invisible. Take it to the streets. Let me hear you scream.
Thank you.
Give me a Holocaust survivor. Give me a Holocaust survivor a big hand. Let me say, we must take come out among the shadows. We're not going backwards by fear. We're going forward for hope. Justice, not missiles, but strong minds break strong chains. I want this Holocaust survivor to say something. Say something, buddy.
You want to say a few words?
He speaks French. The French interpreter. Come on, talk, monsieur.
Voilà. Ce matin, on a parlé pourquoi que nous, qu'on a été prisonniers dans les camps, on ne l'a pas dit.
This morning we asked why us who were prisoners in concentration camp, our story was not told to the world.
Voilà la raison. Parce qu'on nous a empêchés. On nous a dit, tu veux être tranquille, tu mets une muselière.
We were not able because they avoided us to tell them. We were forbidden to tell our story.
C'est pour ça la raison. Sans ça, on aurait causé. J'ai commencé à vouloir causer en 83. On m'a dit, mais une muselière.
I started to tell my story in 1830, but I was told not to tell it.
C'est pour ça qu'on n'a pas parlé. Sans ça, on aurait parlé le gouvernement français, la police française. Hop. On ne pouvait pas.
the French government didn't let us tell our story in our country.
Mais maintenant, on prend dessus et nous combattrons, nous résisterons et nous aurons droit à quelque chose.
But now you can count on us. We'll fight and we'll resist until success.
Alors maintenant, on a besoin que tous les jeunes du monde nous donnent une relève. Nous, on a allumé la flamme. Maintenant, c'est à eux de la nourrir. Mais tous.
Now we need young generation to fight again. We lighted the candle and you need you, young generation, to carry the candle.
Et nous vaincrons. On les aura.
We will win, we'll get them.
Merci à tous.
Let me thank you. Thank you. Before the panel, let me say this one before the panel starts. Racism, anti-Semitism is like a snake. Don't come down to the level of the snake. See repeat if, I come down to the level of the snake can win. The snake is mean and evil. It can't run, it can't jump, it can't fly. I am an eagle. Snake cannot bite a flying eagle. Let's fly higher and higher and higher and higher. We'll win.
I am being told that we can also now invite our own star militants in those who have been leading with the torch of fight against anti-Gypsyism in conversation with Reverend Jesse Jackson. So I would like to ask Ms. Soraya Post, outgoing member of the European Parliament and probably the most effective member of European Parliament that we've ever had. I'd like to invite Ismael Cortés, member of the Spanish Parliament. Please join us on stage. Zola Kundur, founder of the Chirikli Roma organization who is fighting violence in Ukraine in the context of current war. And I would like to invite Julius Rostas, who will be chairing the session and moderating the panel.
To the world, repeat, the world is mostly yellow, brown, black, non-Christian, poor, female, young, and don't speak English. This is our world. This is our world. This is our world. Snakes cannot take it. That's my son, Jonathan Jack. Give Jonathan a big hand, please. Give.
Hi,
son.
son.
He's a brilliant MB. I wish he was on this panel. Jonathan, he speaks so well. My grandson, Jesse III.
Yeah, now. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to moderate a discussion with such distinguished panelists. Reverend Jackson inspired all of us to continue our struggle. And here, as part of this panel, we have Roma activists, public intellectuals, and politicians who struggled for the recognition and also against anti-Gypsyism. Anna Mirga already introduced them, so I'll not lose time with that. But when I read the title of the panel, what came to my mind was the work of American scholar Nancy Fraser, who talked about the struggle for recognition and redistribution of oppressed minorities. Later on, Nancy Fraser came back and said that recognition and redistribution are meaningless without representation. So here we have our own voices that struggle to represent the interests of Roma communities in different countries. So I will invite Soraya, Zola, and Ismail to give a 5-6 minutes speech to reflect on the struggle for recognition and the fight against anti-Gypsies. And then I will invite also Reverend Jackson to reply to your thoughts, and then we'll engage with the audience. Soraya, please.
Thank you, Julius. Tambachtale, Salrom, Bilgare, Sugodisu Samkate, Sampejek Samati, Krasmishtimole, Romenge. Xite vorbi v Englișiscu și ranavles mișto, mezumavav subirimna. Sicilem do Parlamento. I know most of you. I've seen you growing, getting stronger in your conviction to make a better life, to improve the situation of Roma. Somebody tell me often, don't stay in the history. And I will not stay in the history, because as Mr. Jackson said, the future is today. I always said that, because today I'm already planning what to do tomorrow. So tomorrow is already today. So I totally agree on that. But I think it is important to have a recognition for the bad history, the darkest history in modern time on this continent. And it has to recognize that this continent always has been xenophobic, and it is still xenophobic. And that is what has to be recognized. You know, I have been a human rights activist for about 40 years. Different party, political party, wanted me to join them, and I said no, because I need access to different political parties. Then, when the Feministic Initiative asked me, please, Soraya, could you please join our party and candidate for the European Parliament? So I read the political program, and I said to myself, this I could have written myself. So I said, okay, I will do it. And when I made the decision to do it, I knew that I will be guided from my best friend, which is Jesus Christ. Amen. I was 100% sure that he will provide me with wisdom, strength, and courage, and also, how to say, also to safeguard my family at home, because I left my family for 5 years. I only went back on Friday afternoon, and I went back to the Parliament on Monday. And I have a big family. I have 9 grandchildren, 4 children, and my husband is here as well. So it is a sacrifice to go into politics, because when you do it, you have to do it 100%, or stay at home and leave the space for somebody else. Well, in the parliament, I had a strategy. I have to make sure that anti-gypsies will be recognized by the European Parliament. And from there, I would love NGOs to go out to the member states. I also work towards the member states, of course. But that was crucial, because I am sick and tired of all these first aid solutions. It needs surgery. The situation of Roma needs surgery. Political surgery, social surgery, all. End up with first aid solutions. So in that same resolution from 2015 in April, when I also started the first Roma week together with a lot of friends in here, it was crucial to have in the same resolution the recognition of a Memorial Day for Roma Holocaust. There were a struggle until the last day of voting. They didn't want us to say Holocaust. Then I said, okay, then we don't do any resolution, because I am going to live with it. They wanted to say genocide. Okay, it might mean the same, but if you say Holocaust, everybody know who the perpetrators are, during which time, everything. We don't need to explain, so everybody will know. So that was it. Okay, so we don't do it. And then the conservative group, okay, Soraya, okay, we agree. So when the voting was, it was a huge majority, and I was happy for that. And I know that one of my idols, Mr. Romano Rose, have been fighting together with his group so many years for the Holocaust of the Roma and Sinti people. I have also other idols. You are one of them, Mr. Jackson. You know, when I was elected, all the people didn't know me, and I say, okay, you don't know me, you can look at me as Rosa Parks, Dr. King, and a mixture of Malcolm X. That's who I am. And that's how I went into the parliament and made changes together with all these beautiful people in here, because one person is never strong. It's only when we get unified we are strong. You know, as a politician, I can speak and I will not take too much time, but I would like to end up with 3 sentences. I call them my 3 truths. And it goes like this. There is only one race, human. There is only one religion, love. And there is only one world, or no world at all. I hope that you will taste this and keep them in your heart and live with this wisdom, because it is true wisdom. Your neighbor is you and you. We are all neighbors, as Mr. Jackson said. And I don't like the word of tolerance. Who is tolerating whom? Who is on the position to tolerate somebody else? Hello, we are equal. We are born with dignity, equal. And that is our demands. Who are you to put me on a lower share than yourself? Who are you to judge me? Nobody. I met presidents, I met kings. Some people say, oh, you don't get nervous. No. He has 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head, the same as me. So we are equal, and you have to act equal if you are going to be treated equal.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I am somebody.
Before I respond, I want to, at Rev J. Jackson is my Twitter. Say at Rev J. Jackson, Twitter handle. At Rev J. Jackson, Twitter. Facebook, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. Website, rainbowpush.org. So rainbowpush.org. Today is the first day of our connection, we will remain connected forever. Whether it affects one of us directly, affects the rest of us, it's all of us must fight together. Better we live together in peace than die apart in war. There are two things the Roma Sinti member of our family must come together with. One is that there's power in being morally right. It involves risk. It may not be the majority opinion. There's power in being morally right. Rosa Parks had no standing army. She won because she was mostly moral right. Dr. King faced the hogs and the dogs and the jail cells. He's mostly morally right. Mandela in apartheid is morally right. So you have, say, when I am morally right, I have a strong weapon. Morally right. Our issue is not the left nor the right, but the moral center. Neither left nor right, but the moral center. When your back is against the wall, you have three options. Write this down. Say, when my back against the wall, and all have forsaken me, I stand naked against the world. I have three options. I can adjust to my situation and find a comfort zone in depravity. I can adjust. I can resent, be angry all the time, or I can resist. I will never adjust to degradation. I'll not merely resent it. I'll resist, and I will win. Thank you.
Thank you. Zola, please.
Okay. After all these emotional words and about winning, I want to say now a few words about Ukraine and about people and victims of attacks that took place in 2018 in Ukraine. The ongoing conflict on the east of Ukraine gave rise to serious concerns about human rights violation in Ukraine. During the period from April 2018 until November 2018, we had 8 attacks against Roma settlements and individuals. Unfortunately, 2 people were killed, and about 150 Roma became victims of these attacks, including children and women. And I want to give you just few cases. On June 2018, a group of men began destroying tents and stabbed a 24-year-old man to death. 4 people were injured, including 10-year-old boy and his mother who was protecting him. On 2nd July 2018, a 30-year-old Romani woman was found with her throat slit. On 15th of July 2018, a Romani kindergarten and the church were burned down in Mukachevo district, and this is only in just mainly 1 month. Unfortunately, 34% of Ukrainian population supported these attacks and said that the radical groups did right to attack and kill Romani people in Ukraine. The police took notes of the attacks and opened 8 investigations, but unfortunately only 2 cases are currently in the court, and they were closed, but under the pressure of international organizations and Roma NGOs, they were renewed as the prosecutor appealed. What we had to do, we had to react very fast and think how to protect our people, the communities, the children, the women living in the settlements, trying to move from one region to another in search of better life and jobs. So the Roma organizations united into coalition. They appealed to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They appealed to Parliament of Ukraine, to European Parliament, and Soraya made a statement. I remember your statement supporting Ukraine and demanding effective investigation of the cases. We had statements supporting Roma victims of these attacks by UN institutions, Council of Europe, ODIHR, OEC, and even we had an invitation from the U.S. Helsinki Committee to conduct a special hearing in the U.S. Congress. We also spoke, we had the possibility to speak and to bring all these issues to OEC Human Dimension Implementation meeting. It was a special side event dedicated to situation in Ukraine. All this helped us to keep this pressure on Ukrainian government to do the investigation and to act. And after that, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the National Police, they requested technical support from the Council of Europe, from ODIHR. They asked, for example, to teach the police officers how to prevent hate attacks, how to prevent hate crimes, how to teach the journalists how to write about the cases, criminal cases, or how to prevent hate speech in the media. And of course, the Council of Europe and ODIHR reacted, and they will address these issues, will provide technical support and trainings very soon will start in Ukraine, conducted by ODIHR and the Council of Europe for police officers. We already had a big conference for police officers in Ukraine. It was conducted in Odessa for Moldova, Slovakia, and Ukraine. And all these, I hope, will help us to prevent such cases and attacks and murders of people. What is important, I think, is also to work with the society, because when we have 34% of the population supporting such cases, it says about stereotypes and hate that they have towards Roma. And why is that? Is that because we are still so closed and isolated and not ready for dialogue, as I was always asked by different journalists? Or is that because the society is not ready to accept us as we are? As Soraya said, as Mr. Jackson said, I am who I am, I'm somebody, right? So it's not enough to work only with the police or with the journalists. I think we have to work at different levels, at national, very local, like villages, regional, international. And here we need all your support, all your energy, and all your experience that you have to support people in different countries, not only in Ukraine, and to prevent such cases. When we speak about the Holocaust, then very recently, almost about 1 month ago, with the support of the EVZ, it was opened the memorial sign to the victims of Roma genocide, and Mr. Rose was there to open these memorials. And very soon we will have 8 such memorials in different regions of Ukraine. And this is very important, because without the past there is no future, and without history there is no nation. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make this observation. Conscience, say conscience, is not big, fat, and strong. Its power is, it's unmovable. It will not go away. If I assert my conscience, if I express my conscience, I change the world's consciousness. The second point is that I would do a lot of research to come to speak to the Roma Center tomorrow. A lot of data said the forgotten Holocaust, 500,000 killed. The fact is most people never knew it existed. It wasn't forgotten, it was unknown. That's why we're here today, to take the light back to the States. The Roma in the States cannot hide. They must join the struggle, a very public struggle. Not a, say the Roma and this destiny belongs to all of us. None of us must be afraid to stand together. We're going to take our case to the streets. Don't forget that, guys.
Ismail, please.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that it is an honor to be here among many friends. Also, it is a pleasure to see a new generation of Romani activists. It is also a pleasure to share the legacy of the senior Romani activist, also Mr. Romani Rose. It's an honor to be here with you in this setting. I would like to answer in two parts your question. The first one about what does it mean anti-Gypsyism? The second one about methodology to fight against it. About the definition, it is a consensus that anti-Gypsyism, it is a concrete type of racism against the Romani people. I would say even more, it's a system of racial domination against the Romani people. And with it, I want to say that anti-Gypsyism is not just a collection of individual cases of discrimination against the Romani people, but is constant in the history and virtually accepted by the entire society, as our colleague has said in the case of Ukraine. The recognition of the Holocaust is just the peak of the iceberg. It's just one episode in a system of domination that still is going on. Of course, the manifestation, it was quite different, quite specific, but in essence, anti-Gypsyism is keep going. Now, talking about the methodology, I would like, because anti-Gypsyism is a system of domination, it's a power system, then I would like to reflect on different sources of power. And in my case, especially, would like to highlight the power of ideas. I think that's very important. The power of money, talking about redistribution, the power of alliances, the power of institutions, and also the power of violence, and how these four sources of power have been used in history, but also in the present, against the Romani people. So we have to learn and to have access to all these different sources of power, institutions, alliances, money, and also violence. And I would like to clarify, and then Mr. Jackson can explain more. The Romani people have never been a warrior. Yeah, we have been always very peaceful people. But we have to learn how also you can make visible a conflict through peaceful resistance. This is also a way to use violence, but you use the hate of the other against you. And you make them to be hungry and to manifest the type of violence that is underground and can go up. I want to stop here, so I want to keep time for reflection. So one idea about definition, one idea about the methodology, and then 5 sources of power, and especially the reflection on violence and how they did it. I'm very interested in how you revert violence in a peaceful way, and you make visible a conflict that was underground.
Let me observe this. The Roman Sentai has not been peaceful, you've been quiet. So we say there is a difference between being peaceful. Please say there is. Repeat, there is a difference between being peaceful and being quiet. Quietness is the absence of noise. Peace is the presence of justice. You've been quiet. Now get loud and fight back. Second point is that you must not allow the enemy to control the narrative. Trump wants to focus on the border and some Mexicans and the cages at the borders. There are 13 million in America. The Silicon Valley is driven by Indians and Asians. on our college campuses, there's millions on the campuses. We cannot let, if you call me and ask the name, I respond in kind. You control the narrative because you control my reaction. I must choose to react on a higher level than your question. So it's not enough to scream racism. It's time to march and fight back. I urge you students who are here today, you've been quiet too long. You've been quiet too long. You've adjusted. So I must be maladjusted. So I must be maladjusted to degradation. I must be maladjusted to marginalization. I must be maladjusted, being picked on. I work harder, make less, work harder, make less, paid less, live under stress, don't live as long. I am tired, working harder, making less, living under stress, not living as long. I'll put my marching feet in the streets. The reason I keep saying that is because for too long we tried going to the courts alone. That was not enough. Dr. King said if you're in the court, you got 3 or 4 lawyers on both sides and 12 in the jury box. Thousands must be involved. When you move, the whole world move with you. Say when the Roman Center move, repeat, say when the Roman Center move, the whole world will move with you. You are too right to be ignored. Therefore, stand up. Nobody will save you, for you, but you. Those who dare be free must strike the first blow.
Thank you very much. We are opening now the discussions with the audience, and I'm in great position to moderate this. Guillaume will talk at the very end. I see there in the back hand up. Right there, up on the right.
Thank you all very much for your fight for equality and justice for all of us, for us youngsters, for all of you being role models for the young activists all over Europe and all over the world, all Roma and Sinti people, to stand up for themselves. It gives us so much power and courage to see you fighting for our rights every day on a daily basis. Thank you very much for this. And I want to point out something Soraya said, which I find very important, something that deserves more recognition. You said that even in the face of something so cruel, something so devastating, like the Holocaust, we have been treated as second-class victims all along up until today, and this needs to end. We need to fight for ourselves to be recognized as equal human beings and stand up now and see our victims being recognized also equal to all other victims, because this is very crucial for a fight for equality. Thank you very much.
Let me say that
okay, there was basically no question. We have here in the first row down.
Discrimination is a continuing Holocaust. So discrimination, repeat, say discrimination is a continuing, protracted Holocaust. We die daily. Yes.
My name is Mirabella. I know some of you know me. If I took now the microphone, most of you know Soraya Post. Soraya Post, she's done a lot of things for us. She works in the Parliament European, and she's done a lot of things for us. And now she's not anymore in the Parliament European. And for me, it's like a danger that she's not anymore there, because she was doing a lot of things for us, and she was fighting for us. And now I think is the moment for us to make our voice to be heard, to ask, because here is the Parliament, there are members from the Parliament European and from the Union European here, and it's time for us, if the ones, we are 500 Roma people from all the Europe, and I think it's time for us to vote like a democracy and to ask to the Parliament European and the Union European and those that you are agreed with to stand up and to ask to the Parliament European and the Union European to bring back Soraya Post to bring back her in her job, and to start to work. And I think we have to start from now. And I will ask to Jackson King to vote now. It is now the time for the revolution and to be ourselves heard. So please stand up. Who is agreed with to Soraya Post to come at the post at the Parliament European? Please. Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. So the Parliament European is, please stand up so the Parliament European can see, and why not to make a petition to bring back Soraya Post so she can fight for us. Everybody stand up, please, please. You saw the Parliament European and the Union European. You saw we vote for Soraya Post to come back to her office. In September we want her back in the post of office. And Jackson, please be with us and vote for us, for Soraya Post.
Thank you.
Because she's the best one. She was doing a lot of good things.
I cannot vote with you, but I will come back. I will march with you. I will march with you. I will march with you.
Amen.
I will march with you. I will fight back with you. One thing, I must go now, one thing worse than slavery is to adjust to it. One thing worse than being called a minority is to believe it. So Jesus, repeat, Jesus, Joseph, David, and Dr. King, minorities, majority visions. So Jesus, David, Joseph, Dr. King, with minorities, majority visions. If you see further and go further, the world will follow you, because I love you guys. I got to go.
One.
Yeah. Yeah. So we will continue the discussion. Reverend Jackson, as you could realize, is tired after the trip from US and got a bit tired, so he had to retire to rest a little bit because of the other activities also for tomorrow. So let's continue our discussion, and I see here right up in the middle. I'd also kindly ask you if you have questions to ask the distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy, and for transparency reasons, I am a BBC journalist, but I am here representing my own thoughts. The latest EU Parliament results, US Congress, the change in EU Parliament, in the UK Parliament, and so on, have created this anti-establishment vacuum. And those anti-establishment personalities use minorities as both scapegoats and use as excuses to give power to the far right for policies that discriminate those who are vulnerable. There's a current mistrust in government, and people are not voting, and that is a serious issue. How, as minorities, can we trust governments and become active and achieve real results? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to give you the opportunity to answer this question, if possibly briefly, so we can get other questions as well. We still got 15 minutes for this panel.
How can we trust governments and politicians again, if I understood your question, yeah. It's very hard. I must say, when I entered the parliament, I also mistrusted. I didn't have a lot of trust towards politicians. But well in there, I must say, there were more serious politicians than I expected. Of course, there were some politicians who was not at all serious, who just spent their time there. But I must say, most of them were very serious and motivated and engaged. And I would say, towards our people, towards Roma people, or towards minority in general, it is important to get political active, to join political party, to stand for candidacy, because it is important to be where decisions are taken. That's why I chose to candidate, because 40 years an activist, running in these corridors, lobbying members of the parliament at national and European level, it was good. And sometimes it was successful, but most of the time you had a smiling face, yes, and engagement, you know, all this. And when you left, nobody followed up. So it is important that we in person are at the arenas where decisions are taken. It is important that we create good cooperation with the other EU, if I speak about European Union only, with other EU institutions. I had a very good cooperation with the unit, DG Justice, the Roma unit at the Commission, for example. A huge respect for the people working there, and I also felt respect from them towards me and towards my staff in the Parliament. So I just want to say that what is important today for you is, as Mr. Jackson said, we have been too quiet, we have been too silent, because we are polite, and we are, as Ismail said, we are not warriors, we are a peaceful people. But we need to stand up now, because nothing will go for itself. And I must express, I am sincerely afraid of the political situation that Europe are facing, and not only Europe, across the world. It's a global phenomenon, the growing nationalism. And we can see leaders in India, we can see it in South America, and Trump, of course, and also here. So I do understand the mistrust, but it is an easy way out to say that I will vote for the extreme rights because I don't trust. I don't take that as an answer for that. It's just that these racism, these xenophobic tendencies have been there resting all the time, and now they got up on the air because there is no more shame level. You can speak whatever you want. The shame level is lost. The human dignity is lost. And fear, created fear from false news, for example, fake news, have started this. And the failure is among us. The established political party is not a success for the extreme rights. It is a failure of the democratic political party. That's why the situation is as it is today. So, but I mean, to get trust, go out there, be in the party, go on in political party and speak to your friends and say the only way out to solve this political situation is by political measures.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad that this guy, also an activist, became a politician and now in the National Parliament of Spain. Congratulations, Ismail.
Well, I think this is a very relevant question, but what I wanted to say first is that the power vacuum that opened the crisis of the neoliberal establishment is not only a drama necessarily. It opens fears, but it opens also hope and many opportunities to organize things in a different manner. Now, talking about trust doesn't come out of anything. You have to build trust, Soraya said. Yeah? To me, the only way to trust institutions, power structures, is to be inside them. Yeah. So this idea of power sharing that we have to start to fight for, this idea of alliances, participating in different power structures, all the strata of institutions, but also political parties, is the only way to build the trust that is missing now.
Sarah, please.
Well, we used to say that we do not have successful stories about trust, cooperation between the local authorities or government and Roma communities, but that's not true. Because for the last few years, we have very good models that showed and proved success, like, for example, ROMED program or ROMACTID, where they have community action groups, people who are united into like community action groups working with the local authorities or with the national authorities, and members of these community action groups becoming local councillors or even getting into parliaments, which is excellent. And that's why, as Soraya said, go to parliament or be the part of that local authorities or national authorities and try to change something. That's why the international organizations like the Council of Europe and ODIHR launch these political academies for Roma, young and not only of different age, which works like in different countries. Now I don't remember all of them, but like Slovenia, Spain, I think Albania, but I can't remember all the countries now. But I think this is the like entry point for young people or for Roma or national minorities to be part of these decision makers or those who are changing the policy or creating this trust. And the same is, for example, with the police. If we will have Roma working as a police officers, knowing the community the best, then I think then we will have the trust. If we will have Roma teachers working at schools with our children, then I think parents will be bringing their children to schools, and everything can work that way. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. I see two hands. I'll do justice. We'll take the two of them, and then I'll ask the distinguished panelists to be brief. Please, the gentleman here, here in the middle, and then the young lady.
Thank you.
I'm David Donaldson. I'm a Scottish traveller activist, and I'm not the first activist for my people in Scotland. There's been many, many, many before me, like within the wider Roma movement across Europe and indeed across the world. So when I'm sitting here and I'm hearing all this really empowering talk, and I'm glad to hear that everyone here is feeling likewise empowered, I can't help but think one thing, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. How can we ensure change or no change when we're caught up in the system? And in this movement, it seemingly never ends. Many of our communities, when you go out into the community, they see no change. They don't know about what's happening behind doors, they don't know what's happening in policy, and indeed they see no impact on their lives. So how can this policy and perceived change that we're told as activists, as politicians, that it's happening, how can we reconnect this change with real change for our communities? Because right now, when you go out into the grassroots community and when you talk to people on a grassroots level, they see no change, and it's not impacting on them.
Thank you. And the second question, the lady right there at the margin.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Pashelishvili. I represent the Norwegian Helsinki Committee. So speaking about the minorities at large and minority rights, we have seen that at the international level, there are at least attempts to guarantee the rights and protection of the rights of minorities. At the same time, we have a number of European countries which, under their constitutions, try to grant some favorable regimes to the minorities, representatives of communities. But we see in the communities and minorities that some people, they are unwilling or reluctant to use these favorable regimes because maybe the lack of trust and the fear that they might experience discrimination or silent discrimination in the future. So I'm wondering, the problem is that these rights are not effectively implemented in practice. So from your experience, what's your experience from your respective countries, for example, in Sweden, in Ukraine, in Spain? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would ask you something that looks almost impossible, to have brief comments because we have just 4 minutes left, and I'd like to also give the last word to our guest of honor here.
Okay, I will start and I will try to be brief anyhow. Yes, people are disappointed because they don't see the change. I could tell you, during my 40 years of activism, I can see a lot of changes. And we have to celebrate the good, the successes. We are not very good at that. But if we can remind ourselves every day, today we manage this. Today I see 500 youth. I didn't see that 20 years ago. I didn't see any youth. If they were all in my age, okay, I was also younger then, of course. But I mean, I can see another capacity among the Roma movement. It didn't really start yet. I cannot say that we have a Roma movement for real, because it didn't really start. Because we have been active at different level, and this is very good, because we have to realize that anti-gypsies is existing at all levels, everywhere. All the actors who made the consensus to deprive Roma from human rights have to be converted, which means that we have to work on every level. But I think one failure of us as citizens is that we expect too much from others. I think we have to go back to ourselves. And if we want to see changes, we have to be more active, every one of us. And when it comes to Sweden, I'm from Sweden, yes, we have protection and the Council of Europe protection resolution on minority rights. But I think that is also a trap, because everybody are very satisfied, okay, we have special minority rights. But what about the general human rights? I mean, we have 30 articles in the first strongest political document from 1948. It should be included in all of that. So it is a way to make us pleasant, because we are minority with specific rights, which doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean that it creates job for me. It doesn't open the labor market. It doesn't stop the discrimination in schools. It doesn't stop the discrimination when it comes to housing or if I go to the hospital. I cannot say, hello, I have minority rights. Sorry, it's a good picture, but the creation of my security depends on myself, on you, and you, and you. And that is the unity and the movement I would like to speak about. So get out, get politicians, get out, get professors, doctors, get everywhere, in press, in media. We have to be everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Thank you. Zola.
Speaking about Ukraine, we've been fighting since 2003, like several years, to have a national Roma strategy as part of the visa liberalization regime in Ukraine. And only the strong Roma civil society helped us to manage, and the international pressure of the European Union, Council of Europe, and etc. helped us to have this document now. But unfortunately, it's not that effective as we've been expecting. But at the same time, people, as you just said, do not see changes at the local level or at the level of the communities. But it doesn't mean that we do not have these changes. The existence of the Roma strategy and the implementation helped us to build our strong Roma movement in Ukraine, which is excellent. We have Romani women organizations, we have young Roma organizations, we have different type of Roma NGOs and Roma mediators and civil society standing for the rights of the Roma communities. And at the same time, the local authorities which are responsible on the implementation of the Roma strategy started learning and searching the information about Roma, because they have to report, they have to show the results, to implement this document that was approved. And by that, they started the dialogue and cooperation with Roma local organizations and communities. So by that, we also have some changes. And even here, look around, just we have young Roma women here in our conference meeting room. And this is also the excellent change that we have, because several years ago, we wouldn't have that many young Romani girls sitting here, or women. It's also the changes that we have. And I think to have effective implementation of the special recommendations or procedures or policy for the national minorities, the strong civil society is maybe the key here, and maybe also trained and sensitized local authorities who are also responsible on implementation.
Thank you, Zola. Ismail.
On the second question, I wouldn't answer because we wouldn't have any minority rights framework in Spain. On the first question, I subscribe to what my two colleagues said already. When we talk about the system of oppression, it doesn't mean that it's already made forever and that we cannot change anything. So we should have a complex vision of the system of oppression. Of course, there are different positions in the power system, but there are more and more actors and interactions between the different actors, and slowly but surely we can see changes also on the ground, on the level of the communities. You can see more and more highly educated Roma. You can see more access to political parties, to different institutions, cultural institutions, media, academia, police, and so on. So, of course, the change will not come from one day to another, but is gradual and progressive.
Thank you, Ismail. And without wasting any time, I'd rather pass the microphone to our guest, Raymond Guillaume, to say a few words at the end of this panel.
Ben voilà.
Faut que je traduise. Ça marche, ça marche. C'est OK?
Ça sera mon enfin, terminé, hein. On verra ça un autre jour. Bon, je suis là, c'est pour la discrimination et le racisme. Voilà, bon, on ne fait pas à la peau d'un homme. Vous avez des veines, qu'est-ce qui coule dedans? Ça soit un homme noir, un homme blanc, qu'est-ce qui coule dans ses veines? Quelle couleur quel est son sang? Il est rouge.
If I'm here, it's to fight for racism and discrimination. If you look what is a man, you will see his skin, and under his skin is a vein, and in his vein you have blood, and whatever you are, ever your skin is white, ever your skin is black, ever your skin is red, still your blood is the same and it is red.
Alors, il faut se dire, pour peu qu'il y ait de discrimination, pour peu qu'il y ait de racisme, et ça ira beaucoup mieux.
So we need...
On est tous des êtres humains, alors qu'on s'accorde tous, et tout ira bien.
Okay, so we need to unite, to be all together, and we all fight together racism and discrimination, then we will have a better world.
Thank you very much. We stop here, and thank you very much for your part.
So, since we are running a little bit late, we are still here for the last panel, and I really do encourage you to stay with us, because this is where we'll have the decision makers and big institutions joining us to discuss how can we move forward together. So I would like to ask the next speakers to join us immediately. Thorsten Affelbach, Szabolcs Schmidt, Dr. David Kilger, Isabella Michalake, and Vivian, our moderator. You're here.
Warsaw Uprising will be standing outside. So what time?
No, we can stand in here, because probably what will happen is that it will be the sound of sirens, because the sirens in the whole city. Yeah.
Yeah, just have to tell us what it says on the plate, on the nameplate. Also ich denke mal gleich sind sowieso der erste Sprecher.
and join us for the last panel before the closing. We are beginning now the last session, so please take your seats and close the door. And we'll begin immediately.
Let's try to keep this.
Gut, prima. Did you make something wrong?
Don't worry about the background.
Nobody has a presentation, right?
No.
Yeah, nobody has.
working? Is everybody hearing me? Is this working? You're hearing me in the back? Okay. So, shall we start? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I know we had the last session was very inspirational and very charismatic, but let's do the closing. And first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Vivian Isberg, and I'm from Finland. For the second year, I have the honor to lead the national group from Finland here to the Cannabis Youth Initiative event. It has been such an honor for me to be part of this such a unique and such an important movement. Well, I'm sorry. Then I would just like to thank the main organizers. Wait a second. ERIAC, European Roma Institute for Art and Culture, Central Council of German Sinti and Roma, Documentation and Cultural Center of German Sinti and Roma, and Ternupe International Roma Youth Network. Thank you for your contribution, and thank you for this conference you organized for the International Quest. Shall we give a round of applause for the organizers? First, we had a room full, we had lots of participants and facilitators in the room, but do we have any participants, facilitators, group leaders in the room? There's only... Okay, can you please stand up? Because I want people to see what the Cannabis Youth Initiative is all about. Thank you, there is one. We had lots of people and we have over 400 participants there. But yeah, the Cannabis Youth Initiative is all about the participants. But for the reflection for the conference, I would like us to speak a little bit about the next steps ahead. What do we look forward to, and what are the tools we need in the future for the combat anti-Gypsyism, resist discrimination? Because we address and participants address a very much topics as discrimination and anti-Gypsyism, and this is something which affects with every Roma, every young Roma in Europe, more or less. So this is such a big issue in Europe. So without further ado, first we have Thorsten Afflerbach. I don't know if the name is correctly pronounced, but you are the head of the support team of the special representative of the Secretary General for Roma issues at Council of Europe. Could you please briefly introduce yourself and the work that you do, and please share some thoughts you have about the conference and about the topics we have dealt today.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me? So my name is Thorsten Afflerbach. I'm the head of division of the Roma and Travelers team at the Council of Europe. And I'm very happy to share my views and also the future, my reflections of this conference for the future with you. But first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting the Council of Europe to be present at this event. It's the first time for me to participate in the commemoration events, and it's a great honor for me to be here. Now, when we look at the reflections, outcome of the conference and the way for the future, I just need to very briefly explain to you in one sentence how the Council of Europe works. The Council of Europe is an international intergovernmental organization in Strasbourg with 47 member states, and we work in three main fields. The first one is standard setting. So this is conventions or recommendations, so legal instruments or politically binding instruments. The second one is monitoring. It's monitoring the implementation of those instruments. And the third one is capacity building. So this is cooperation with member states, but also cooperation with NGOs. So what I take away from this conference, and I would also like for you to take away, is some information that of the projects that we are currently running in cooperation with some of the other key actors who are present here. I notice, of course, with great interest when Reverend Jesse Jackson said Roma are too invisible. And we heard this already in the morning with a particular view to history and Roma history teaching in a presentation by Marko Pečak, who was referring to a project that the Council of Europe is running in cooperation with the Roma Education Fund and the Georg Eckert Institute for International Textbook Research, that in the 20 countries that we looked at, we found that in curricula and in textbooks, there is either a complete lack of representation of Sinti Roma travelers, or there is a misrepresentation of it. And if there are mentions at total in, they're dominated by the Second World War. So there's no mention of Romani culture or Romani language or of the contribution of Sinti and Roma to society, to European cultural heritage. So these are the findings, and those of you who listened to Marco's presentation in the morning had all the details of his presentation. So what we have, based on this evidence, what we have decided is that at the Council of Europe we will prepare a recommendation to the member states, a recommendation to the governments of the member states to include the teaching of Roma and traveler history in the curricula and in teaching materials of all the member states. This recommendation is currently being prepared. We hope that it will be adopted by the end of the year, and then it goes out as a politically binding document adopted by the Committee of Ministers of all 47 member states of the Council of Europe. So it's also addressed to the governments of all 47 member states of the Council of Europe. Now, the implementation of this recommendation, that brings me to my second point, the monitoring. We need your help because we cannot monitor this alone. So obviously, once the recommendation is out, we try to do our utmost to see if governments implement this recommendation, but we also count on you to help us to provide information, to ask critical questions to the government, and to provide us with information on the fact whether, on the question whether this recommendation is actually being implemented or not. Now, when we come to my third, second point was monitoring. When I come to the third point, capacity building, it's of course a lot of it is about knowledge, knowledge that we need to provide. And we can't do this alone because our resources are fairly limited. So we do this in cooperation with many other key stakeholders. So for example, we have a database on the genocide of Roma, which we have set up in cooperation with the OSCE, Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, ODIHR. And I see Dan Dogi is in the room there at the corner, so we are cooperating on this database. This database is available, Genocide of the Roma, so you type in or you Google Roma genocide, you will find a website on this. So this is some of the capacity building that we provide. We also provide capacity building in cooperation with the European Commission, and I'm happy that Szabolcs Schmidt is next to me, in so-called joint programs with the European Commission on inclusive education, on access to justice, and also on assisting municipalities at local level. Zola Kondo has already, in her presentation, mentioned very briefly RomEd or RomAct. So we have another one, RomActed. So these are joint programs that increase the capacity at local level to deal with Roma inclusion. We also have another project that we support, and this is the European Roma Institutes of Arts and Culture, which was set up by the Council of Europe, Open Society Foundation, and the Alliance for ERI. And we continuously support this institute. The institute has a very, very strong vocation to fight anti-Gypsyism through arts and culture, and also through establishing or through raising the self-esteem of Roma artists and Roma cultural activists. But the main point is to raise awareness in the majority population about the contribution of Roma artists to the common cultural heritage of Europe, and by that way to fight anti-Gypsyism. We also, and I'm happy that so many participants participated today of the Roma youth event. We will see more, I think, tomorrow afternoon. After the ceremony, there are some 500 of you. I think the Council of Europe has for many years supported the contribution of different delegations of Roma young people to this event. But not only to this event, I'll have to say, here in Poland, because we're preparing this event and we're also running follow-up activities in our youth centers. The Council of Europe has 2 youth centers, one in Strasbourg, one in Budapest. So I would like to invite those of you who attend, I will say the same tomorrow to all the others, to also look for the follow-up event, so that the visit here in Auschwitz and the conference in Krakow is not just a one-off thing, but that it needs to be followed up, and it can be followed up with the Council of Europe either in Strasbourg or in Budapest. To finish, I would like to say that this is an important event to remember the past, and we need to work together to this. Paul Verschure said at the end, just before the lunch break, he said in one of his important points, we need to work together, and also Reverend Jackson, of course, very often, more than once, encouraged us to join hands and to cooperate. So we need to work together on this. Remembering the past is important, but we need to be vigilant for the present as well. We need to be vigilant to fight anti-Gypsyism in order to enable a future in Europe where all Sinti and Roma and travelers can live in Europe free of discrimination and free of hate speech and hate crime. So we need to defend diversity and the commitment to diversity. Diversity is a richness of the European society. Diversity is not a threat. So it should not just be accepted, it should be cherished. This is the important. Diversity is an asset of Europe. It must be more than just tolerated and accepted. It should be cherished as one of the strengths of European society. So once we have a clear commitment to diversity, we would live in a better world, in a better Europe for everybody, for not just the majority population, and not only for Sinti and Roma and travelers, but for all the other national or ethnic minorities as well. And this is what we need to strive for, and this is also why we need, as Mr. Jackson said, to join hands, or as Paul said, we need to work together on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Szabolcs Schmidt. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, but you are the head of unit for non-discrimination and Roma coordination of the European Commission. I would like to ask you to also introduce yourself and the work that you do, and also I have a question for you. That was there something that caught your attention today that you will take with you and maybe put in action in your work?
Yeah, thank you very much. Madam Chair, first of all, I would also like to express my heartily appreciation for the invitation to the European Commission to attend this conference. Actually, you already introduced myself. My name is Szabolcs Schmidt. I'm head of unit for non-discrimination, anti-discrimination, which includes also Roma inclusion policies, and all that within the structures of the European Commission. Now, I think in general the European Commission is rather associated with monitoring law enforcement in member states, initiating of new legislation, negotiations, investigations in the case of complaints, infringement procedures. So we are the guardian of the treaty. But this conference was about arts, culture, collective memory, education, historiography, reconciliation. So this is not where we are typically present. So the more I appreciate that I could have been here, because I think this was one of the greatest events where I have been with so many enthusiastic people. I'm not only speaking about the last session, but throughout this long day and the evening before, I met so many enthusiastic artists, historians, museologists, educators, activists, witnesses from the Holocaust, that it was really amazing for me. I would like to be very short with my response. First, I would like to respond to the question which is above our panel. Is Auschwitz only sleeping? And then I would like to say only 3 takeaways, which I would like to bring with me. On Auschwitz, I think the question was posed at the very beginning that in light of all this hatred, intolerance, prejudice, is Auschwitz something which could at any time come back? And here I would simply refer back to what Mr. Rose said in his opening speeches. I think that was such a civilization break that we can really speak about the time before and after Auschwitz. And actually I would just like to extend with one important thought. The European Union is the European answer for the time after Auschwitz. The whole European community was born on the idea that there is no one who is above the others. We are all equal. All the peoples, all the nations, all the individuals are on equal footing. It doesn't matter who is the victory and who is the loser, who is strong, who is weak, who is big, who is small, who is there, who is here. What matters is that we are all equal. That was the founding idea of the European Union. And I think if you now study the treaties, you will see immediately in Article 2 the core values, human dignity, democracy, but also equality for all. And I think this is what we really have to be aware that this protects us. It's the European Union. And I'm also with Mr. Rose, we cannot be self-confident that this is for the eternity. We see now that one member state is leaving us, but all in all, we also see that the Union project has been a highly successful and appealing one for all the nations on the European continent. So this is to the sleeping. But I am afraid of another type of sleepiness, and that is really the memory on Auschwitz. In the country where I grew up, actually the Roma Holocaust was not at all recognized. Even in the 90s, when I was claiming that Sinti is an ethnic group of people, I was said, no, it is a social category, and you shouldn't use anymore the word Zigeuner in German, and then everything will be fine. But how can you recognize the crimes under the Holocaust if you don't accept the distinct features of the language, of the culture, of all the contributions history, of individuals who brought in something to our common human values? So I think it is extremely important also to keep alive this memory of Auschwitz so that we always remember what has happened and that it doesn't come back. So I think in that respect, again, in my everydays, I'm sometimes still fighting whether I can be optimistic, but because I often see a lot of negligence, as if it is just a question of numbers and figures. Because there were only 500 million Roma, is it not worse to remember them as all the other victims? I cannot follow this logic, but this is what I'm sometimes confronted. But after this conference and having seen all these positive examples, I think we can be prudently more optimistic. I would like now to go to my takeaways. So first takeaway is that I think that the European Union has played one important role. It's not the only one, but I think if we look back in the past 2 decades, we can see that after the reunification of Europe in 2004, the subject of Roma exclusion has become something on the political agenda of the European Union. And I do see these 2 processes connected to each other. By the way, it was only in 2004 that the European Parliament had a Roma, an ethnic Roma, as a representative. Later on, there were more, and we met Mrs. Soraya Post, who has very enthusiastically been fighting for Roma rights, and I think that is also a fantastic thing, that you don't need to have from each and every member state a representative. It was enough to have 3, 4 fighters for Roma rights, and then this spreads all over the European Union. So there you see really a clear value added of the European Union. You also see that we had established even a strategic framework back in 2011, under the umbrella of which each and every member state, also those who were not so sensitive on Roma inclusion matters, started to work. And I think that has also moved us ahead. Mr. Afflerbach mentioned the funding side. I think this is also important. Without this political support, it would have not been possible to make so many funds available for all these projects you mentioned, but also for events like this. And last not least, I would also like to come back to the 2nd of August. The European institutions as a whole, the Parliament, but also the Commission, have always been in the forefront of commemorating the 2nd of August. And I'm really proud that together with Mr. Rosa and many others, we will also have the European Commissioner tomorrow there at the ceremony to commemorate the victims of the Roma Holocaust. It is extremely important, and you can look back that over time more and more and more member states have joined this commemoration on the 2nd of August, which was again not the case 2 decades ago. A second takeaway is on the legislation. We do have very strong protection in the European Union against ethnically based discrimination and also against xenophobic hate crime. We do have it. We are not in the US of the 60s. The legal protection is there, and it's one of the best in the world. But, and this conference gave again testimony on that, it does not reach out where it should. A lot of people still think in the European Union that if they are subject of discrimination on the basis of their ethnicity, they could not fight against it. And this is something which I take away, we have to work upon to make sure that the rights are better known and exercised and brought to court more intensively, as it is in other areas of work, because this is the protection is there. And the last takeaway, very pragmatically, looking forward in the future, I just referred to the framework we have. And I think here we are now in a situation that we get a new commission. We have already a new parliament. And I think what has to come, but this is only my view, working with this subject, we have to have also a new strategy for the next 10 years or so. I think this is indispensable. We have reached a lot. It's not very visible, but we have moved a lot in the right direction in order to give it more dynamics. We need, again, a common strategy. But it cannot be just a repetition and a continuation of what we had. I think 2 things are important to be taken into account. One is better participation. I don't think that anything can be done above the heads of those who are concerned. So we just need somehow a way into the normality that, that we all together as a society work on our problems. These are not the problems of a group, it's our common societal issue where Roma, non-Roma have to work together at all levels. So we have to see how we ensure better participation than it was so far, and we also have to take very seriously this problem of anti-Gypsyism. I think we have to acknowledge that all the lack of advance in the socio-economic situation has largely to do with this latent anti-Gypsyism, which is there, and I think, and we heard a lot of good examples through culture, through education, through commemorations, through museums, through public debate. A lot of works have to be done that people understand that there is an anti-Gypsyistic behavior in many of us. Often it is an unconscious bias, but we have to make sure that this circle is broken. But as a final word, I would like to cite just one positive sentence I noted down from yesterday evening. Christoph Gill said that he now has to respond to many of the viewers of his artworks. Where do Roma come from? What happened during World War II? And I'm so happy that these are now the questions that are posed, and that gives me optimism that we can move ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we move on to Isabella Mihalahe, and you are the advocacy officer at the European Network Against Racism, and you have a long history in the Romani field, so to say. Could you please share with us about the work? And I would like to ask you the question that do you have any recommendation, like how we could empower the Roma population around Europe to stand up more for themselves and for their rights? Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I know everybody has thanked already the organizer, but I think it's really important to see how impressive this whole event was and how unprecedented it was, and the level that it reached in terms of iconic human rights activists throughout the world. So I think it's important from a symbolic point of view to acknowledge this as a sign that things need to change, and maybe we need to start from zero, because as someone said it today, it's not shameful sometimes to acknowledge we have done things wrongly, but that we had the willingness and the power to try and do things. We tried in a way, like the colleagues from the European Commission tried with the framework from a social perspective, and now I think we all acknowledge we have to reverse and go at the root problem and understand that it's all based, or it's because anti-Gypsyism. So I think it's important for us not to minimize what is going on today here, and to make sure that next time we meet, we are going to have even a higher representation from the part of all institutions. I think a lot of things, and when it comes to me, it's not about me talking about my work, because I'm just a small activist, and I could never, ever compare myself with people like Jesse Jackson, right? But everybody's work is important. Here I represent the European Network Against Racism, which is a pan-European network of organizations across the world fighting all forms of racism, but also the Alliance Against Anti-Gypsyism, which is a coalition of Roma civil society organizations and non-Roma civil society organizations, which are fighting for the recognition of the term, but also for making this term operational at the level of the member states, but also at the level of international organizations. Many things have been said already today, and I don't think I have the wisdom to equal many of them. But what I think it has not been said enough, maybe, it's the depth of the pain, the persecution that Roma and Sinti have been struggling with during World War II, but also before and after. Right? So it's important to understand that it didn't happen in a vacuum, and that whatever we are living today, it's not happening in a vacuum. There is a systematic persecution that Roma have been exposed to, right? And also when we talk about what we acknowledge is something horrendous as the Holocaust, we still don't have a word for it. And here, Soraya Post has mentioned that only at the level of, if you want, institution and international organization, of which all of the representatives are here today, just the European Parliament is the only one that has actually mentioned and as you heard, Soraya Post said she really fought not to have negotiated down the term Holocaust for the genocide. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that if we want to be true to ourselves, we also have to do much more for the recognition of the Roma Holocaust as such, and not just use the term genocide, because it's not reflective of what actually happened. And also in the face of the evidence that was presented today, that in fact we have so much information about, the persecution of Roma and Sinti during the Holocaust, it's also, I think, key to admit or to acknowledge that, and someone said it today, I think, that it was not just a Nazi regime persecution, but it's a European-wide continent persecution of Roma. Why this is important, not just because it's a historical fact, right? But it's also important because it actually helps us understand why Roma and Sinti are in the situation they are today, that are fighting with what we call anti-Gypsyism, right? And these governments, these states are still responsible not for restorative justice and compensation of the victims, but also have a moral obligation to make sure that Roma and Sinti have a full access to rights and citizenship in many of the countries. Some time ago, the former Human Rights Commissioner of the Council of Europe said something which I think is still very important today. That is, that it would be ideal that every country in Europe reviews its history to include Roma and Sinti. And we talked here about truth and reconciliation commissions, right? It's still a subject that continues to come back all the time. And I think the debate now is not that it shouldn't be, but how it should be, how we should go about it. I'm not here today to basically tell you how to do it, but it's just for us to reflect of what it should be its role. And as Hammarberg said it, I think that every country should start reviewing its own history to make sure that Roma and Sinti are part of that history, but also that there will be processes put in place for the victims of different persecution systems will receive compensation. He also talked about having an overseeing independent European institution to make sure, as you said, I have put it in your report, that the whole process is actually inclusive, it's meaningful, and it's representative. Now, one of the last points, because I know I have to conclude, it's for the governments and international organizations. It was very well said here that international organizations that are present here today have been at the lead, at the forefront of moving the human rights agenda forward. And that is true. But at the same time, what we need to understand that is still not enough, right? That there is an obligation to push the governments to do their utmost to acknowledge anti-Gypsyism at national level.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you, but now it's 5 o'clock.
Yes.
And there's about the Warsaw Uprising. So you're going to hear the sirens just in very seconds. And once we hear them, we're going to rise up. And we can do it just now. Let's wait for the siren. Obviously, we didn't hear the siren, but now we can sit down. Yeah. It was heard on the outside. Okay, okay, good to know. Okay, but now we shall continue, and Isabella, please.
All right,
continue.
Thank you. Yes. The point I was making is, or trying to make, is that it's important to recognize that we are dealing with institutional racism that is really embedded in the culture of institutions, whether it's at local, regional, national, and sometimes we have it also at international level, because primarily this institution were built from a white colonial perspective, which needs to be recognized, right? And we need to deal with it. That adversity that I heard the representative from the European Commission talking about, it's important to be reflected in the essence of what it actually represents, including in their own institution. I mean, unfortunately, at the level of international organization, they are some of the widest organization that we have seen. And also, when it comes to the European Parliament, INAR has published earlier this year just a review where we look at the representation within the European Parliament, and we see that also after elections we have only 5% of people of color that are part of the European Parliament. So I think it's important to acknowledge it. It's okay. We live in a world that it's dominated by, you know, white supremacists, and it's, you know, but that needs to change with acknowledging that that's the situation and that we have to work together on it. And when it comes to, because I don't want to take too much time, but then answering to the question I've been given by the chair, like how do we empower the Roma? And also I want to reflect on the question that was asked to you, Soraya, about, you know, how do we change the status quo, right? Because it's very important. I think it's important, and it's related to what we've discussed today. It's important that Roma take the lead, right? That we become our own agents of change, and that we take weapons in our hands, which are symbolic weapons, as knowledge, right? It's important that we know ourselves, the history we've been through, and then therefore we are able to claim our own space and create our own narratives. I think that part of this whole long awakening for the Roma Holocaust to be acknowledged as such is because many of us didn't know we were part of it as victims. I didn't know as a child. I found out the book that was speaking about Roma, and I was like, wow, what is this, right? It's later on where your grandparents start to talk about it, and then you start recognizing all the things you cross through your life that, you know, somehow that's the reason of why you are called names, or, you know, that's why you feel different. And you shouldn't feel different. So I think knowledge is really power, and we need to do that more. And we also, as you said, Soraya, and I fully agree with you, we need to take our own place within society, even if it's not given to us, in the same way Jesse Jackson said. So just running for political position, it's so key and so important, whether it's at local, at regional, or European level, national, it doesn't matter. The more we are, the more we have the opportunity to speak our own experiences, to empower our own, but also to be able to teach others about ourselves. Because most of the time, the way we are being represented, whether in narratives, whether in reports and everywhere, is by what we are not. And this is what anti-Gypsyism also stands for. If you look at the definition we have also within the Alliance, is like, you know, the way we are being perceived. And not necessarily the pride being a, you know, Roma, and what do we, you know, what keeps us together as Roma. So I think it's important that we are able to take spaces and to educate ourselves and to fight for ourselves. Jesse Jackson was speaking about really, you know, just fighting, demonstrating. I take that to mean symbolically, not just in marching, which is so key, but also in making sure that whenever racism happens, we condemn it, right? We are not silent. We talk against it, whether it's in marching, whether it's through letters, whether it's going to court. And unfortunately, this is where we also have a problem when it comes to fighting anti-Gypsyism, that going to court does not necessarily, unfortunately, for most Roma or for many, does not result in a just satisfaction, by a judge, right? Because the whole judicial system in itself, it's many times contaminated by people with bias and stereotypes because of the lack of instruction, because of ignorance, and because of prejudice. So we need to do much more, both on education side through different institutions, but also for us to be able to permeate. The fact that we have so many Roma representatives within police forces has helped that many times to prevent hate crimes attacks from happening. And it's so important. Zola Kondur was speaking today about some of the good practices we have at local level through different initiatives. And we may think it's small, but many times that saved lives, right? So being able to also coalesce with other organizations, institutions, it's important, but also coalesce across agendas. As we have heard, history of persecution is always the same. It has the same narrative. It has the same way of putting people down. So coalescing with the Black community, coalescing with the Muslim community, and with any other community, with the Jewish community, it's important in having not just a common voice, but fighting the same fight. And that's my last point. In the context of increasing racism and extreme right and all these popular, attacks or language that we can see, it's important that the anti-racists understand we are not isolated. Understand that there's more of us, not just the Roma, but it's just the Jews, it's also the Muslim, it's the people of African descent, and so on and so forth. And they cannot fight us all. They cannot win the war, right? So being united, it's important for us as Roma to understand is not just an empowerment tool, but it's also a tool that is effective, because then the racist will not be able to bully us nor fight us. And I will just like to end with saying what Jesse Jackson said. Your silence is betrayal. So don't be silent on your own pain. Just talk about it, and let's be united together. Thank you.
Isabella. And the last, but definitely not the least, we have Moritz Kilger. I don't know if this also pronounced correctly, but Moritz Kilger is from EVZ Foundation, and you are also very active in several institutions. Future, I mentioned you are board member of the Berlin Foundation of Remembrance, Responsibility, and Future, and also member of the advisory board of the Documentation Center for Nazi Forced Labor in Berlin. Please introduce yourself and present yourself. And I do have a question for you also, like how would you recommend for us as a Roma youth activist and Roma youth advocacies, like in order for these young European Roma to gain a deeper knowledge about the remembrance, responsibility, and the future, what would you propose to have tools for it?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not an activist. I'm not coming from the civil rights movement. I'm part of the official German federal bureaucracy, part of the recompensation processes, with everything what can be said to it. So my foundation was founded in 2000 with the objective to compensate or recompensate forced enslaved laborers. And after hard and tough and long negotiations, the foundation was set up in the year 2000 and collect money from the German industry and from the German government, and most of it was paid out to about 1.6 million forced enslaved laborers, and some rest was kept to have this capital-based foundation which we are today. And we have two primary objectives today after these compensation processes have been finished in the year 2007. The first is to still be there for the survivors and to to give humanitarian aid to survivors, which are still several 100,000 people among us. So it's always been said that, okay, we have no much time to have these witnesses among us, but we still have quantitative figures for a longer time. And also in the Roma community. And the second objective is to have something which has to do with the title of this conference. I know it's very hard to say, and you can debate it orally and in several seminars, but it's somehow of prevention of that this will never happen again. Many people say, okay, this is happening again and over, but I have a different view on that. So what is the role for an institution like mine today? And I will take out of it and come back to your questions. To your question. Okay, we are a funding institution. So we fund partners, we have projects, we have 20 projects, 20 programs and 200 projects, and we have about a budget of 8 million a year, which is not nothing, but compared to other institutions, Commission, the OSF, it's something. And we are active in the part of humanitarian aid, as I said, to survivors. I think I can say that the EVZ is sometimes, especially in the field of the Roma, leading. And we want to be that for the future as well, to help especially survivors of the PŘEMYS, the survivors of the Roma Holocaust, in these special countries we have. The second goal we have is policy making. So our foundation consists of 27 members in the board of trustees. So these are all representatives of these difficult negotiations. But we have government officials from different countries. We have the industry. We have policy makers. We have NGOs. We have the Roma side. We have the Jewish side. We have the Americans, Israel, and so on and so forth. And we can lobbying in a good sense to shape political processes. But I think the most important role, and this comes back to what has been said in the, I think it was the second panel today about the narratives, is an institution like mine, is a symbol. It's a symbol, a special symbol of Germany, how Germany dealt with Auschwitz, oscillating between, on the one side, people or institutions or the German industry took over responsibility. Many companies paid in with having access by 45. But on the other hand, it was too late, too little, too difficult, too less people, too much about own interests. And my institution is oscillating between that, also represented by the Board of Trustees. So we have the year 2019, and in Germany we have 1919. We are commemorating the first German democracy, funded by the Weimar Constitution in 1919. And by 1919, it was not obvious that the Weimar Republic ended in Auschwitz. It was more or less an open process. And one of the things, I think one can say, which led to the catastrophe and the total break of civilization, is that not enough institution, organizations, or people of the so-called elite or institutionalized society or government raised their voices. Doctors, professors, teachers, in the university, media, journalists, they kept more and more silent and didn't show courage and didn't show visibility and stayed invisible. And this led to this tipping of the German society, which then was falling down. And I think this is apart from what I said before, the most important thing, and this is what I take from you, from here, that we are representing Germany or the German government and industry, and as a symbol, it's our obligation, to be here and to accompany what I'm working only 2 years with this foundation, but since 20 years ago, obviously, there haven't been people in this event. So what our obligation is to be there and to accompany it by funding, by policy processes, but as representatives that we are. And this I see as the most important role for the EVZ actually, and so my recommendation, or at least my pledge, would be that you, as I said before, be more visible. I think Emma Marzi said it today. It's about shaping narratives, which at some point find its outcome in school books, in different school books. Shaping narratives and be there and be part of this process of coalition building, capacity building, and all that. Civil rights movement, organized institution, government-based institution like mine, that they are like combined together, and this could be different than in the 20s in Germany. And so this would be actually my plea for you to not stopping and to come to institutions like ours with what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moritz Kilger, and I want to thank you all the panelists, and thank you the audience for your time and for your attention. And now you would have an opportunity to comment on or make some questions for the panelists. Before we have a question from there, yeah, you can go on.
Yeah, so I have a question for all of the speakers today. If they could share their experience on the matter. So you spoke about your organization of Roma to talk with other organizations, so with the Muslim community and the black community, to present a united front against racism and people who are trying to be anti-Semitic or xenophobic or homophobic and things like that. But we are talking about groups who, to some extent, have a very united front when in their propaganda. So, for instance, against Muslims, refugees are bad, they commit crimes, stuff like that. Of course, there is an idea going around that the government and the media just isn't reporting about the crimes, so their pages online are the only ones who talk about the actual crimes committed by refugees. We have, of course, people talking about black people, and especially about the Roma. I am personally from Slovenia, so there has been a lot of immigration of people of such descent there. So I am aware that there is the idea going around that they are not clean, they smell, they don't work a lot, they are less intelligent, and that actually goes for a lot of groups and minorities which are being targeted. So my question is, besides like simply calling such groups simple names like racism and things like that, what else are you planning on doing in the future? Like you can shut down their sites, but they will just make more. So what exactly is it that with the United Front are you planning on doing, like more on a local level and things like that? Thank you.
Another guy, and then you, okay?
Thank you. I have two questions. One for the representatives of institutions and one's for the activists. For the institutions, what I hear you say is very much along the lines of, yeah, be visible, be part of it, and so on. But that's not enough. That's too easy. We need a much more solid roadmap if we want to have traction and impact in the future. Right? So for instance, from my perspective, we need to think, we have to digitize all the sources. We have to make them all available. We have to translate them in all the possible languages. We have to still find survivors and get their memories, and then we have to build an alternative social network, a European social network that allows every citizen to have access to our shared history. Because in that way, only in that way, do we start to address the battle that we're facing right now about identity. And that's also then more a question towards the activists. What we look at here is a battle over identity. But if you are declared a minority, that doesn't make you a minority. It just shows you that somebody else is looking for a mirror to define themselves. You are not a minority because you declared one. This morning I also was confronted with some interesting challenges that I could take as being declared a representative of something that is not very positive. But I don't see it as such. I see it more as also the search of someone else to define themselves, right? So I think it's really important we move away from this narrative around minority, majority, and much more about this variability of European identities. And we can also get strength for being placed in this position. We are just, or Sinti Roma and other occasions are just seen, there you are a mirror of somebody else. So then be that example. If they want you to be that mirror, okay, be the mirror, be the example, and take it in a proactive, constructive way. We are not going to make any progress if we place ourselves in this role of victims, whomever we are. That's a very passive role. We want to act, we want to create and shape this future for Europe, and in that we can play an important role, but the institutions have to help us, and they have to help us with a concrete action plan, a roadmap that brings us further with concrete targets. That goes way beyond, okay, go on the street and say something. It's just not enough. And also it's a way for the institutions to, again, pass the buck to the citizen. Now go out on the street, do something. No. We need a concrete roadmap, and also institutions must be willing to stick their necks out and take the risk of maybe being wrong, but in the meantime shaping European future and memory. Thank you.
We only have time for one question more, but I see so many hands rising up here. But I will give the last one for this gentleman in the front. Thank you.
My name is Bisarek. I'm one of the activists in Brussels. I'm the one of the employees working with the Roma travelers in Brussels. And my question is toward Monsieur Sablo-Schmidt. As far as on 7 May there was a mass arrestation of travelers in Belgium. There was a huge action where 1,200 police officers were engaged, and many caravans and cars were arrested, were taken by the police. Now, together with the people on the ground, we tried to make a lot of movements. We tried to address different institutions. Actually, the one who stepped in and provided help first were the few churches from Germany and France. And at the same time, one of the pastors said, listen, I'm going to write a letter to the European Commission. And then a month later, they got an answer from you, Mr. Salbos, saying that it's not in the competences of the European Union to interfere in the individual cases. But now my question is more, if we have taken the caravans of the entire travelers community in Brussels, is that an individual case, or should we interpret it as a attack toward the community of the travelers in Brussels? I mean, here, for me, was clear sign that is not an individual case. And when I'm saying many cars and caravans and belongings and pocket money were taken, that was of the people who are innocent. And among those people, there were around 20 criminals only.
Mr. Schmidt, if you may start.
Yeah, okay, then I start actually in the reverse order, yes. I start with this question concerning police raid in Sinti traveler camps in the outskirts of Brussels. I think what is important to understand, the European Commission is not a sort of super police which supervises each and every individual action of the member state authorities. What our responsibility is to verify whether the applicable legislation is properly transposed into national legislation, and whether it is also not a case of systematic mal-application. And this is our competence, but if there is an individual case that several dozen or even 100 travelers feel that they have been treated in compliance with the European directive, then it is still the competence of the national authorities to investigate the case and to take the remedy if appropriate. And exactly that is happening in Belgium. I can tell you, and this is again a big advantage of the European framework, that we do have structures where if such questions come up, I can relatively easily inquire with the given member state, what is the state of art? And I know that the Belgium equality body, UNIA, is looking into that. They are about to come up with a report how they consider to their police, and then they will take action. That is the state of law. It is not that the European Commission will supervise each and everything. We would have had a problem if, for instance, in a member state, we see that no action is taken. But that's not the case. And this is my response to that. You have to really distinguish between the application of law and individual cases, even if it concerns many people. The other question on the participation, actually both questions concerned that. What you were speaking about is something which is very close to my heart, because I really think that people have to better understand in Europe the historical context, to have the narrative which is valid and factually correct for their given country. But this is again something which has to be done in the individual countries, because I think the situation, what you presented in Croatia is completely different from what happened in Spain during that time, and in Poland and in other countries. So I think this is a task which has to be carried out in each of the countries, and which cannot be done with a one-size-fits-all from Europe. We don't even have the competence. But what I want to achieve is that member states start to think about it. What is missing in our school books? What can be done more to promote also respective artist activities? What needs to be done when it comes to commemoration? But I cannot, and I do not want to prescribe that, because what is important that the dialogue takes place in the given societies. Otherwise, it will be just imposed by Europe. What we think when we speak about participation is more the participation of Roma interest representation organization in the elaboration and also in the monitoring of all these strategies. Just to say in a nutshell, what we have now is that there is a common European framework which obliges every member state to have a national strategy or set of actions. But what we see is that Roma organizations are not very closely involved in monitoring how they are implemented, and that we consider as a shortcoming. So this type of participation of whatever action is it, if it is about school books or about education or segregation on the labor market, that there is nothing done without the close involvement of those who are concerned. So this is more the type of participation. But I would also like to come back on a comment you made with the hate crime. That is something which I think is really one of the huge challenges for the future, because that all happens mainly online. You find all sort of messages which are there. As I said already, the xenophobic hate crime is forbidden by law. The challenge is how to trace it down and then to take appropriate action. What the Commission started already quite some time ago, it's more than a year ago, we have agreements with these big social network providers that they, if they get an alert, signal, a warning that this is hate crime, that they immediately take action and verify and then take it off. And there, I don't have now the figures exactly in my head because that is dealt with colleagues by mine, but that seems to function fairly well. But of course, it depends very much also on the activity of the other users, whether they report these type of messages. But there, I think also the big social network providers understood that this is their legal responsibility. But we have to see how it evolves over time. I'm fully with you that this will not be a trivial question. But I would like to come back to one thing, and this is the participation also of ethnic Roma in the works of the international institutions. I think this is extremely important. For instance, in my own unit, 50% of the policy officers are ethnic Roma. So I think this is, and this is by intention. I don't want to have either one club nor the other club. It is very important that we cooperate, but I am really strongly warning against this expression of white supremacy in the European institutions. This really is an accusation that the European institutions would have a racist belief. And this is something which I can really not accept at all. It's a disgrace also to all the work which was done by Soraya Post, who not only on her own, but with the help of many other MEPs who are non-Roma, have put out all these resolutions. So there is no white supremacy. This is really a very dangerous expression which we should not use. We should strive for a good understanding, cooperation, and respect in all directions, and not accusations into each other's side. Thank you.
No. So I have 2 points. The first thing is also referring to the situation of travelers in Belgium, but also in other countries, and not only travelers. I think it is important for you also to know that maybe you have more rights than you think of and that you know of, and maybe you have more mechanisms available at your disposal than you know of. So of course it is, but this is your responsibility to inform yourself about the possibilities that you have. Now, one of this is your participation in this conference, so we can tell you about the possibilities that you have. So you mentioned this person who, of course, out of all good intentions, wanted to help and says, I write a letter to the European Commission. There are other instruments, there are other mechanisms available. They all have different rules of procedures, so you would also need to inform yourself about in which way they can help. But maybe they can help in this case or in other cases. So for example, at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, there's a European Commissioner for Human Rights. There's Dunja Mijatovic, the current post holder. Isabella mentioned in her presentation one of the predecessors, Thomas Hammerberg. That's a little while ago by now. The current one is Dunja Mijatovic. So, for example, that would be an address. I'm not saying that Dunja Mijatovic is, as Mr. Schmidt said, none of the European institutions or organizations are some sort of world police that come in, and also Dunja Mijatovic is certainly not Catwoman who can fly in and solve the issue. But it would be useful for her to be informed about the case, and I'm sure that at the next visit and at the next meeting with the Belgian government, she will draw attention to this, or we shall mention this some way and another. And it is also little puzzle pieces, different pieces that you need to solve a problem. So also there, for example, the involvement of the Council of Europe Human Rights Commissioner could be helpful. As I said, I'm not promising you now that she saves this thing in this issue in short time, but she would certainly address it, and it's important for her to know. There's the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which is again governed by a completely different set of rules and procedures. But it would be, I think, interesting for you to just look at the website of the Court of Human Rights and see in which cases can we make an application at the European Court of Human Rights. Now, it's a very complex issue, so it needs a little bit of studying the rules and regulations of this court, but it's worth looking into this. We have the European Social Charter, in which case the right to housing is included. So also there have a look at this. So once you study these type of mechanisms, yeah, there may be other instruments and mechanisms available to you than that come in at first sight. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, the second point I wanted to make is also about the move away from the narrative of minority and majority. Now, from an intellectual, from a conceptual point of view, I agree with you, and I think this is an important step. Now, from a legal point of view, we have a certain issue here, because one of the legal instruments that the Council of Europe has is called Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. And you only qualify for the protection of this legal instrument if you are a national minority. A second instrument we have is called European Charter of Regional or Minority Languages. So you only qualify if you admit that your language is a minority language. So from an intellectual point of view, I agree with you. From a legal point of view, protection under certain instruments, at least that we provide, and for which we provide monitoring mechanisms, is linked to the recognition as a national minority or as a minority language. Yeah.
This on, yes. Just shortly, I was not making an accusation. I was exercising my democratic right to speak up, and I think it's also sad that someone from such an important institution is telling person of color how to exercise her democratic right. Having said that, back to the questions. Yes, I will also want to mention on the issue of the Belgium case, because we've been a bit involved as part of the Alliance Against Anti-Gypsyism with BSED and with others. Actually, there's been a few things that have been done already also for the Council of Europe. So there's been already letters sent to the Commissioner, also to the European complaint sent to the European Social Charter, also to the UN, including, I think, maybe the rapporteur for housing. And indeed, UNIA has, that's it. It's a second report that UNIA has sent. Now, yes. Absolutely, extremely good. Now, the thing is that what we have seen is that we believe that there is a systematic approach that the police authorities are taking against Roma in Belgium, and that caravans are being confiscated, not just for the ones that where maybe there was a legitimate, let's say, concern from the part of the police, but everybody was seized caravans without, an appropriate investigation into the particular problem. So an overall disproportionate approach has been used by the police in that case. So that's why the letter was sent to the European Commission, where it does have, I guess, some competence to act. Having said that, to the question on moving away from the minority discourse and trying not to get victimized. I mean, yes, I was going to say the same things that Thorsten here said, that unfortunately, as situation stands now, in order for us to be able to exercise particular rights like civil, political, cultural rights, we have to act within certain frames. Right? And for so many years, Roma have fought in various countries to be acknowledged either as minority, as ethnic minority or national minority, and sometimes even within constitutions. So that led to them being able to benefit from rights that otherwise wouldn't have had. Otherwise, I do take your point on board that, you know, at the level of the discourse, we don't necessarily, you know, see ourselves as a minority from the point of view like we mean less because there is no minority as such, or everybody can be a minority in different, you know, in different situations, that we see ourselves as we want to see ourselves and not necessarily how we have been want to be perceived. And that's why I spoke earlier about anti-Gypsyism, which primarily is the way we are being perceived and portrayed, and we should really move away in creating our own identity, right, and being able to be proud about it. How do we build alliances, and how really, back to the first question, how can we call out on those racist groups or individuals that are so vocal, you know, even on social media and so on and so forth? So there's different ways. And what we try to do is, first of all, bring people together and try to exchange who we are, right? And understand that we have a common goal, we have a common pain, and we have to act together. What we need to do, and what we already try to do, is to also be able to learn from each other. For instance, I give you a concrete example. Like meetings with the Jewish movement, the Jewish organization, has taught that what we can, for instance, learn from them is how to create safe spaces when hate crime attacks happen against any of our community that is not necessarily Jewish, Roma, Muslim, etc., in protecting these worship places, because they have built such an experience and positive experience of how to do that. So that's one example of how we try to stay safe by learning from each other. Another is obviously that we always continue to have to condemn and educate the other ones, right? But we have to create alliances. But we need to speak up. We need to condemn whenever racists speak out. Like in the case of Ukraine, and I think, Zola, you already explained this. It was not just Chirikli in the Ukraine or the organization in Ukraine. It was the Council of Europe, maybe the European Commission, other organizations outside of Ukraine that started to act, right? And to provide support. But at the same time, we need to make sure that there is a rule of law that takes precedence at national level, that institutions that are there to protect us do their job. And this is something very important that I want to transmit, you know, that we need to understand that too much responsibility is a time placed on civil society. Like, we have to protect ourselves, we have to do that, we have to do the other one. But we forget that in most of the situation, it's the state that has the obligation to protect us. And we are there just to be able to consult. So this pushing the blame and responsibility onto civil society, sometimes I feel that it's too unfair. And just to finish with another example, between the 23rd and the 26th of September, and you are all invited, with different partner organizations, are organizing an anti-racism week within the parliament, also with the anti-racism intergroup within the parliament, where we are trying to bring together different movements, anti-racist movements, and try to find messages with policymakers where we can actually try to push the anti-racism in one direction. So not necessarily to be fragmented. I'm not going to necessarily lobby for like a Roma position, but on an overall position of where the European Parliament, the European Commission, and other institutions have to act together to be able to condemn acts of racism, but also to protect us from and creating these safe spaces and not allowing or pushing us to be at the forefront of this fight. I don't know if I was able to answer fully, but thank you.
Maybe just one point on the what you mentioned about the this is not enough. This is too slow from the institutions we are representing. What I advocated before was the combined approach of institutions of civil rights movements or activist movements and institution like mine, which is a bureaucracy federal level, because this is obviously a clash of cultures which comes together, and this might be a pitfall of this combined approach, because bureaucracy in itself is not about having fast moves or go ahead with taking risk or change. Especially the German bureaucracy, I can tell you, administration is very much focused on stability, rule of law. And this is sometimes, I mean, Romani Rosa is one of the prominent advocates who tells us that we are too slow and we should move much more forward with a different speed, but it's not that easy. And it's not that in the big institutions there are people sitting and thinking, okay, shoveling their thumbs. This is not the case. But to have change or have movement or have impact within a very stable structure is for me, for example, in my position, a daily task, because my institution, for example, is governed by the or audited by the Federal Ministry of Finance, and this is a very rigid, complex ministry. I don't want to say that these people have bad things in mind, but they're just looking on the rule of law, and if it's applied properly, and institutions like ours, they have to take this into account, and if I reply to Romani Rosa, I try to make this point too for this, institutionalized or organized official world that we are coming from.
Something that also bureaucratic organizations can do.
Very difficult.
I see so many hands raising, so we got time for 2 brief questions and brief answers anymore.
I think this guy was.
Oh, you think so? We have time until 5. And yeah, it's 10 to 6. Okay, 2. Yeah. Exactly. So Anna, would you like to?
Thank you, Vivian. So officially we are working until 5. I mean, not working. We can be here as long as we want and we can have debates as long as we want. But our wonderful translators are here until 5. And I just want us to be mindful of this. And also there is a concert happening in 1 hour. So I don't know whether it leaves all of you who are going time. If these are comments and not questions, I would accept. If these are questions, that I'm sorry, but I think we'll have to take it out of the room. And it has to be kept until 1 minute, Maria. I'm serious. I'll take the mic. No, you need a microphone.
I'm from Barcelona, no? My name is Maria Rubia. I'm from Barcelona. I'm a Roman woman. I need translator for English, ¿vale? My colleague, make my translator. 1 minute more. ¿Estamos todos aquí buscando lo mismo?
We are all together asking about same question.
Pero también es importante que miremos el pasado
But it's so important to see the past
para ver qué es lo que no estamos haciendo en el presente.
and to question the important question about what we are doing in a wrong way.
Sí, seguimos, ¿lo quieres hacer, profesora? Seguimos poniendo el foco en la comunidad romaní, de la responsabilidad.
Okay. We are looking all the time to the Romani people.
Tenemos que incidir en entender que la sociedad está enferma. El racismo y el antigitanismo es una enfermedad.
Okay. We have to see the racism and the anti-Gypsy like a sick.
We have to understand that our society is illness. Anti-Gypsyism is a illness.
No podemos esperar que simplemente trabajando con la comunidad y empoderando a la comunidad.
We cannot wait just simply working with and empowering the community, the Roma community, we will have the solution. Auschwitz is sleeping,
Pero el racismo está vivo.
but racism is awake and alive.
No puede ser permitido el racismo en las instituciones.
We cannot permit racism in institutions.
Y tenemos todavía tenemos ultraderecha, tenemos
And we have already extreme right wings and his political representatives in the institution. And that's it.
Hello. The last question of today. Our language, the Romani language, is recognized in the Netherlands as a national minority language, but the speakers not. They don't want to recognize the speakers. If the Netherlands don't want to do this, can you explain me how we can do this? It can be, you can explain it now or later to me, how we can do it if the country don't want this.
Comment, not a question.
Yeah, but I said maybe later. Yeah.
Okay, maybe
we can
later.
speak about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I'm really apologizing for cutting off again a discussion. I think it's yet another argument that we really lack spaces and lack time to be together and to exchange in an environment that allows us to speak on equal footing, and it really doesn't happen much. So I think with this, I would like to close the conference. First of all, thank you so much to all the panelists and the speakers for your commitment and for the efforts of being here, of being honest and really trying to work together with us. To the wonderful audience that has been varying in numbers but equally enthusiastic at all times. So thank you all of you who are joining us in person, and also thank you all of you who maybe have been joining us online. So for the live streams and the online viewers. And finally, I'd like to also thank the interpreters, the translators for their work, and also for the staff of the building for allowing us to be here. There is much more to come tonight, and also tomorrow we'll be all spending time together in Auschwitz-Birkenau during the official commemoration. From the side of ERIAC, as one of the co-organizers, thank you so much for being here. Reach out to us and let's work together. Thank you.
Dears, now you saw the international conference is Auschwitz Only Sleeping, about Sinti and Roma narratives after the Holocaust. And tomorrow you can see the commemoration ceremony in Auschwitz at 11 o'clock, and after and 2:30 you can see the speeches by international organizations and people. See you tomorrow.